We are going through an epidemic of attention deficit, and often ignored, but a key problem in education today. And that led us to create the Antilibrary Podcast as higher education teachers and researchers. Every moment we are bombarded with a lot of information, more than we can process, and that often leaves us agitated and distracted. We also need to discern between the right and relevant information and a huge pile of potentially false and irrelevant information. My students are great multitaskers, but I see them constantly juggling social media, texting, and studying for multiple courses, which leads to a noticeable dip in concentration that makes it even more difficult for them to complete complex academic tasks. Of course, there are options like screen breaks, prioritization of tasks, and time management, which can be effective in regulating distractions. But we think that there are deeper underlying issues, and certain things need to adjust in keeping with the changing reality of this moment. Attention is an unique issue that has long attracted a lot of attention from neuroscientists, cognitive scientists, philosophers, doctors, and so on, both in the contemporary period and in early periods of history. We will dive into the issue of attention and how that is tied to the future of education, and how algorithms are inevitably going to play a key role in it. So, Shubhendu, it should be a good thing if we know more about the world, no? So, why is too much information a bad thing?
I think a helpful model for understanding why both too much information and too little information is bad for attention is what neuroscientist Levy suggested in her load theory in the mid 1990s. This theory suggests that the level of perceptual load in a task, or the amount of information involved in processing task relevant stimuli, determines how effectively we filter out distractions. When perceptual load is low, there is unused attentional capacity, leading to processing of more irrelevant information, that is, more distraction. Conversely, high perceptual load exhausts our attentional resources, reducing our ability to filter out distractors. Imagine you are reading a book. If you are reading it in an empty room without any distractions, you should be able to give it your full attention, right? And if you are reading it in a noisy place, a cafe or a bus, for example, you should be distracted. But in reality, things are a bit more complicated. Some people might feel more distracted in an empty room and more focused amid a certain amount of noise. Perceptual load theory suggests the importance of finding this middle ground between too much perceptual load and too little for maximum attention.
In an ideal world, we should be able to decide what amount of information we let in and what we filter out. The famous British psychologist Donald Broadbent actually suggests this theory called the Bottleneck Model of information processing. Basically, what Broadbent proposes is that information is processed in stages with a filter selectively allowing only certain information to pass through for further processing. This filter, based on physical characteristics like pitch or loudness, determines which information gets deeper traction in our brain. But algorithms mess things up. Algorithms on social media platforms are designed to maximize user engagement, often at the expense of attention spans. These algorithms prioritize content that is likely to hold a user's attention, leading to a cycle of instant gratification and potentially reduced ability to focus on tasks which require sustained attention. In our project, the Antilibrary Podcast, we focus on short, bite-sized information bursts to combat the pervasive decline of attention spans. And we balance it out with longer conversational content, including interviews of eminent scholars and experts in different fields, which is aimed at addressing more bigger conceptual issues.
The issue of attention is important not only in learning but in our very definition of selfhood. The cognitive psychologist and Treisman's integration theory, which became highly influential in the 1980s, proposes that attention plays a crucial role in binding together features, for example, color and shape of an object, that are processed separately by different brain areas. Without a certain amount of attention, we might jumble up perceptual data and it might be difficult for us to find coherence in external reality. Attention is now widely considered to be pivotal for both consciousness and memory. For example, J.C. Prince proposes that attention's primary role is projecting processed information into working memory, leading to conscious awareness. These ideas are not entirely new. Jonathan Ganeri, in his book Attention Not Self, draws upon the 5th century Buddhist philosopher Buddha Gosa to explain the issue. Buddha Gosa has two related concepts called Akagata, which literally means one pointedness or singular attention of the mind, or placing the mind at one idea at a time, which makes the mind calm and focused, capable of knowledge, and Manosikara, or focusing the mind on an object, guiding the mind towards the knowledge of that object. Attention is so important to our humanness that Ganeri uses this great image of a car with attention at the driver's seat, and I quote, "A human being is like a self-driving vehicle whose various complex perceptual, motor, and planning systems enable it to navigate its environment." Unquote.
That is a great image. What I find fascinating about Ganeri's argument is that attention, rather than a fixed self, is the central explanatory principle for understanding human beings' experience and situatedness in the world. Since we have such fragmented and short attention spans, are we becoming so fragmented that a unitary idea of selfhood is no longer tenable in the age of information?
We need to remember that Jonathan Ganeri is drawing upon the Buddhist notion of the disunity of the mind in theorizing attention in his book, Attention Not Self. The focusing and placing aspects of attention, or using attention as spotlight to illuminate an idea and as a lever to grasp an object of knowledge, work at disjunctive levels. This perspective aligns with the core Buddhist concept of anatta, or no self, or non self, which rejects the notion of an enduring, independent, permanent self. So ultimately, the mind is a disunited entity. This might be a difficult idea for understanding, especially for people in the West, which places such a high premium on selfhood. But the idea of no self emphasizes the importance of attention precisely because attention stitches together the different parts of what is called self. This disunity calls for mindfulness. Mindfulness then becomes not only a process of taking screen breaks or detoxing the mind of information, which are in themselves absolutely worthy things to do, but an intentional act to purposefully pay attention to something, sustaining the attention, staying in the present moment, and letting the experience unfold without judgment. And this can include digressions, as long as we are mindful about it. We at the Antilibrary Podcast are trying to practice mindfulness by focusing on one issue at a time, such as understanding attention in the information age, while letting the conversation wander from contemporary neuroscience to ancient Buddhist philosophy. I think it's really important to ramble, to go through the process of connecting dots which are spaced out, to enjoy knowledge. The algorithm and YouTube gurus, of course, keep telling us that we need to engineer similar content in the same niche over and over again. But we try to resist that at the Antilibrary Podcast, to keep connecting seemingly different ideas and making knowledge adventurous again.
But we at the Anti-Library are not anti-algorithm. We think algorithms are going to shape educational content to a large extent, and we do need to adjust our teaching tools to this reality. We are also firmly committed to public education, and we believe the highly specialized knowledge produced at universities need to be translatable to the general public. That has always been the task of education, to contribute towards public life. We seek to cultivate attention at the Anti-Library Podcast as we are inspired by what philosophers have talked about the role of attention in leading a good life. The 17th century philosopher René Descartes thought that attention is key to overcoming doubts and having certain ideas. in the late 19th century, which saw a renewed focus on attention in the West, led to different theories of it. Alexander Bain thought that attention is key to action, while G.F. Stout thought that attention is key to retreating from action and reflecting upon it. So you see, there are contradictions, but it has always been important.
But my favorite philosopher for understanding the link between algorithms and attention is the American psychologist and philosopher William James, who is writing in the late 19th century. James viewed attention as related to volitional acts and described it in terms of sensory organ adjustments and anticipatory preparation for what he calls ideation centers or sources of ideas. If you think about it, algorithms also keep suggesting contents that we watch and like, and keep triggering the same ideation centers. I think educators have a role to play in understanding the role of algorithms in education. Even as the need for discernment and attention remain key to education, embracing the power of algorithms and AI can make the ideation process more efficient, collaborative, and innovative, ultimately leading to more impactful solutions and creative outcomes. And that sense of adventure, surprise, and wonder also lies at the heart of the Anti-Library podcast. Please subscribe to it.